This is a special presentation for the Global Entrepreneurship Month for the Department of Commerce, ScaleUp Mastermind. And as some of you may know, the Center for Business and Innovation offers a number of different resources that help businesses along their journey with starting business, getting coaching along that way, and then finally thriving in business. And a number of those resources, which include the Washington Center for Women in Business, the Business Enterprise Startup Training Program, the Small Business Development Center is also housed under the Center for Business and Innovation, and finally the ScaleUp Business Training Program for businesses in Thurston County and statewide in Washington. We also house the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, which is for those who are interested in getting into government contracting or doing better at government contracting. And we house a program called the South Thurston Economic Development Initiative, which helps get into the rural areas in Thurston County. Lots of great resources through the Center for Business and Innovation. One of those resources I'd like to introduce to you right now. He has agreed to come on and share with us some of his information as a professional speaker. Bennett Marks, a professional speaker and business coach and the managing director of BDS Global. Bennett Marks, so go ahead and take it away, Ben.
Okay, thanks, James. Hi, everyone. It was great to talk to some of you while we started. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. And there we go. All right. Well, it's good to meet you guys. Like James said, my name's Bennett Marks, and I've spent the better part of 35 years now trying to understand how people and markets behave, and especially working with business leaders like you. Where I started is as an analyst at JP Morgan Chase, and then I went into sales during the boom, the IT boom, and I went into sales. I worked in marketing departments. I've served in management roles, and most recently in capital acquisition as a private equity finance manager. My consultancy focuses on CEOs and business leaders, and I help them to drive revenues and gain efficiencies in their business, hit their targets, and build market value, among other things. I also facilitate a group of business leaders through Renaissance Executive Forums. So I'd like to share some insights today and see if it stirs some thought with you, or even better yet, brings to light the need for some critical business decisions. And I know that, we spoke to a couple different people, some that have businesses that are in motion, some consultants that have certain applications, and I'm sure some others that have newer businesses. So what I'm going to try to do is speak to a general audience. And if you have questions, I welcome them. If you'd like to get a hold of me after the presentation, that's fine too. And I have a special offer for you when we complete today. Today's topic takes about 40 minutes. And so let's get started. So, the title of the program is called The Art of Differentiation Through Storytelling. And, why do I call it that? Well, basically that we love stories. People love to hear stories, and they learn in a particular way that shares stories and metaphors and anchors certain concepts through those stories. Like, for instance, there's 3 different types of ways that stories come to us. One is through facts or empirical data. The other is through actual stories. And in a business sense, they come through results. So we're going to focus a little bit on that. But I want you to consider that our reality exists because we have a story to tell about it. We have a language that describes what we perceive. And it exists because we use that language to describe what we see and feel and touch and taste and sense. And so if we changed our language, we would change our reality. Does that make sense to everyone? So I want to show you something here of a number of different brands that you may have seen throughout the years, but really the question becomes, what do these brands have in common, if you think about it? Well, not just that most of them are gone, not that Google's gone or Microsoft is gone, but that they failed to grab our attention with these particular products. Like Vonage had these crazy commercials that came on, and I still really don't know. I know it was about phone service, but I don't really understand how they differentiated and why, because they failed to tell me a story that had any particular meaning to me. And it's the same story with all these other brands, like Aflac that's got this crazy duck that shows up. I know they offer insurance, but I couldn't for the life of me describe, what exactly they do. Their messaging is unclear, confusing, and vague, and they failed to gain any customer loyalty. And so, and even established brands like Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Coke have trouble trying to sell products that their audience doesn't understand. Why? Because there's no compelling narrative to it. These brands have created such confusion that they failed miserably, and many of these specific products are off the market. And all of them typically were funded very well. They had money to invest in their marketing and advertising, and certainly to hire specialists that help them create the products and the advertising, but they failed. So why is that important? And how could that possibly happen to a sophisticated, well-funded company? And maybe more importantly, why should that matter to any of you or your company? So one of the books that I read before I did my business school training in 2010 was called Differentiate or Die. And it was written by a man named Jack Trout. Jack is the same guy that co-authored the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, which was a seminal work in the 80s. But this book, Differentiate or Die, the premise was that we're assaulted every day with heaps of junk mail, inundated with spam mail, forced to see banner ads, billboards, radio ads, television commercials, and now text messages. And they call us on the phone and they just really never leave us alone, these marketers. And because of this assault, we attuned our listening such that we can sort through heaps of snail mail or hundreds of emails, voicemails, channel surf, and otherwise zero in on exactly what's important to us and urgent, and get rid of the rest. In fact, we're so good at that, we don't even have to open the mail to know if it's junk or if it's something important. Just by the typeface on the envelope, we can see or hear in a fraction of a second some commercial and know immediately if we should stick around or continue channel surfing. Are you with me here? Probably. So if that's the truth about your audience as well, how do you get past that filter? How do you catch people's attention? So I want you to consider this, that your audience already knows perfectly well if you're right for their needs or not. The good news is that there's really literally no convincing to be done at all. The people that need your product already know that they need it and want it, and already listening and watching out for it. They're listening. And as they travel around all day and night, they say, are you my product? Are you my product? Are you my solution? Are you? And so they're already primed for listening for what's going to resolve their problems. And the other good news is there's an appropriate way to grab their attention in a millisecond and hold their attention such that it compels them to buy your product. So let's walk through my points here. Oops. So first, the audience needs to be completely and utterly clear on what you offer. Not some catchy phrase or clever quip like we talked about, and not features and benefits, but rather you have to tell them what your product or service does in terms of the problems that it solves and how that stands apart from everything else. Nothing else, no features, no benefits, just basically the problems that it solves. So quite simply, if you can create intellectual clarity and emotional certainty, you're gold. Why? Because we don't want to be sold. We want to be informed and then make our own decisions based on emotional certainty. So you must ask questions that move your customers through their thought process. This is where most brands fail. They try to sell features and benefits and clever quips, and in the process, they lose their audience. You must ask the right questions to engage your audience. It sounds pretty straightforward, I know. So why don't more companies do this? Good question. I wish I had more time to drill down on that, but consider that proper language is what will differentiate you from the competition. So again, yeah, if you don't compete on value, you end up, if you don't accentuate your value and what it does for your customer, you end up competing on price. And so my specialty is really how to build value. So that should be good news. If you change your language, you change your results. I'll give you an example and you tell me which one is better. Just a hypothetical pitch on some random product. So, okay, so today I'm going to tell you how to wash your car and buff it out with some new magic detergent. And as a result, it's going to be really shiny and really beautiful, and you'll be the envy of every other car owner. It'll be really great, just super wonderful. So you notice that I accentuated features and benefits. Or conversely, let me throw this at you. You ever go through a car wash and come out the other side and your car is still dirty? What if I could show you a way that removed completely all that excess dirt and left you looking good every time? What if you could bypass all the other gimmicks and just produce a stunning, clean car? Would that be worth your while? So let me ask you something. Which one do you think grabbed your attention more? The first one that I said it's going to be super great and wonderful with all these features and benefits, or the second one where I asked a certain question and it grabbed your attention? So again, we only have so much time today. These points are just cover the basics of really what there is to share in this area. There's more to telling a story that I'm going to try to cover just the mechanics and then maybe leave you with some ideas about how you want to pursue this further. So, the mechanics of differentiation, which, if the slide will work, are the first, excuse me, the slide's not working. There we go. Okay, so the mechanics start with proper market research. In other words, what's going on out there in the world that defines our market? We must understand that. If you don't understand what's happening out there in the world and what other customers like and don't like about what's happening out there in the world, you don't really have an idea of how to sell or differentiate your product. So we need to understand that. And we first start wide, understanding, what the overall GDP is of a market, and then narrow our scope. So GDP is, of course, gross domestic product, or how much money is being spent overall in that area. And then in that section of the market. Tell me the top 3 or 5 players that seem to own the market. Why? Well, what are they doing that makes them number 1, 2, and 3? And a lot of times, people will emulate that type of service. Like, for instance, McDonald's was around well before Burger King ever came. But now Burger King copies and puts their restaurants across the street from all the McDonald's, and they basically offer much the same product. And then, so there's the top 1, 2, or 3 in a field, and then there's what the rest of the field is doing. And perhaps more importantly, what are they doing wrong? What's missing? Where's the opportunity to capture market share? And once you understand the field, you can design your products or service around it. And the best companies continue to do this season after season. They keep their eyes on the market and continue to track what people want. They stand out because they deliver what no one else is delivering, and they speak to that. It is the essence of differentiation, innovation, and market dominance. Think about how Netflix, for instance, hit the scene way back when Blockbuster Video clearly controlled the videotape market. People were sick of late fees and having to schlep back to the video store to return their videos. And Netflix, the founder of Netflix, speaks about this in his bio and says, I was returning a Blockbuster Video one night, and I said, there's got to be a better way. And thus Netflix was born, and there's a bigger story around it, but you can see where I'm going with that. He understood what the customers didn't like about the competition, and he allowed himself to differentiate his own product or service accordingly. And today Netflix is massive. They're $1 billion empire, and Blockbuster is out of business. So it's definitely a type of ideology here that will show you how to properly engage your market and differentiate yourself in a way that compels your customers to do business with you and keeps them coming back for more. And if you can tell the right story or grab their attention in the ways that I alluded to, you'll do very well. And if you'll notice the businesses that you do, you're clear about what they do and what they offer. By the way, there's nothing wrong with investing in top-level industry reports to grab this information. Companies like Gallup, Forrester, Gartner are excellent ways to stay ahead of the curve, or be bold and conduct your own surveys, on SurveyMonkey. Ultimately, though, you want to be able to say, this is what we do, and no one else even comes close to that. So, as I mentioned, well, let's talk about why I'm here today. You might say that I'm an expert at linguistics, the art of differentiation. As I mentioned, people don't want to be sold. They want to be they want to be informed, and then they want to make a good decision. They don't want to be forced to change. They don't want to have to understand your features and benefits, but they do want to have that information that solves a problem. So the distinction of enrollment is asking them questions about what sort of problems they have, getting their undivided attention, and quite simply saying, we have a solution. It's not spewing a litany of features and benefits. It's getting their attention. Enrollment is an elegant way to capture their attention by asking the right questions. Some people call this the hook. So the study of psychographics looks at the stages that we move through in our minds, from a vague awareness to intellectual clarity and emotional certainty. A proper approach brings out all of the issues by asking the right questions and allowing the customers to do their own thinking. If done right, they'll come out to the same conclusion and a sale will be made. You need to know their pain points and ask the right questions about those pain points. And it needs to be delivered in the right order. we learn and as I mentioned, and grow through stories. Another way of defining this is called the narrative. If you can tell a good story, you can shape the narrative of your customer. So the best sales efforts have metaphors or meta messages, which is just a small section of the larger story that add up and that has meaning and relevance for the audience. These stories deliver both intellectual clarity and emotional certainty, and people purchase when these two things exist. If done correctly, those same people become your marketing department, and through telling friends and family about their great experience, they duplicate your efforts. Think about a great movie that you saw with your friends. That's called duplicatable language. That's when your message goes viral, and it's the ultimate way to build business. I'll give you an example. Think about the story of Amazon Prime and the phrase free shipping. Free shipping tells a story, does it not? Okay, so before we conclude today, I just want to say there's a ton of other criteria that go into proper marketing and branding, from testing the market to conversion rates, marketing channels, package design, promotional materials, and so on and so forth. I get that. Today was really just a primer to understand the language of differentiation and how to compel people and translate that to your message. So if you're interested in more, I'm happy to discuss. I hope that the message that we learn through stories and metaphor is critical and to any type of business that you have, whether you're in your startup phase or your mid-market or you're an enterprise level. And again, those companies, larger companies like Google and Apple and Microsoft had market dominance, but because they failed to tell a story that captured the attention of their audience, those products failed. And I think they're more careful about the way they launch products. So that's about it. That's about all that we have time for. I'll take questions now. If you guys have anything that you want to discuss, please unmute your mic and fire away.
Actually, I did have one thing I was hoping that you might be able to elaborate on for us. When you talk about, one thing I thought was interesting is talking about the need for intellectual clarity and emotional certainty.
Yes.
I think a lot of people have a little bit of trouble, even myself included, sometimes with the ScaleUp program, trying to differentiate what the intellectual clarity is that's not a feature or a benefit, right? How to attack the purpose rather without just eliciting a bunch of different benefits and features, because sometimes we think they're self-explanatory, but perhaps it's not hitting that mark.
Yeah, good question, James. Okay, so in other words, when I said we want to be informed, we want to have intellectual clarity on what exists and what the choices in the market are all about. And that is not about features and benefits. That's about the problems that we solve, okay? Late fees and having to schlep your video back to the Blockbuster store, and take time out of your busy day to do so was a big problem. And so Netflix came along and offered a solution to that. And they spoke in terms of that. That's the intellectual clarity. But we don't buy on intellectual clarity. We buy on emotional certainty. And you know who taught me that? Jordan Belfort, The Wolf of Wall Street. And he wrote this book on it, which is excellent. I know that, they were scamming people, but the methodology of sales they use had many key components to what they were doing that are excellent in the marketplace. And so Belfort talked about emotional certainty. We buy from our heart. If we feel like it's the right thing to do, we'll pull the trigger. If we don't, we won't. And so through your process, the questions that you ask Like for instance, James, I know you're starting a business. How's that going for you? Do you have enough money to do everything that you need to be doing in your business? So that question is going to drive, I know, problems in his business, because no one has enough money to do what they want in business. It's a factor of every kind of business. So if I ask that question, all of a sudden, all of these issues come up. Now, I didn't say anything about what I offer. All I have to do is say, oh, I completely understand that. I've got a solution for that. If you're interested, I'd like to set up a phone call. And then what we do is we design an experience that gives them the essence of that solution without features and benefit. It demonstrates and gives a visceral experience to the product or service. So that's what I was getting at. And I explain that in my book. If you're interested in the book, Launching Your Dreams, A Practical Guide to Starting a Business and Getting Funded, please send me a note to that email address with your name and contact information, and I'll send you a free copy of the ebook. And then I've got articles on my website that I wrote about that subject. What's the next question?
Go ahead, Joe.
I have a question for you, Bennett, and I appreciate you taking the time to
Yeah.
explain these things. I agree that we as humans, we purchase mostly on emotion. And when
Yes.
we're in business, we're marketing toward that emotional stickiness. We want people to remember us, and not just remember us when we're in front of them, but remember us when we're not in front of them.
And you
When
get
they're-
that they already have that emotion. You don't have to create the emotion, right? You
Agreed.
just have to push the right button to bring that up and out.
To find that emotion and identify our company, our product, our service with that
Yes.
emotion. So when they experience it, they think of us. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also know that music, and we know this through advertising, is a huge component of emotion, both good and bad.
Absolutely.
How
Yeah.
do you propose, and how come music plays such a part, and does it correlate with story, or is it just a different component of advertising?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trained in neurolinguistics. And for those of you who haven't taken a look at the study of neurolinguistics, I highly recommend you just pick up a book and understand what anchors concepts into our thinking. What is it about a story that makes it memorable? There's two components, okay? There's the analytical or the facts, like I said, and then there's typically the psycho-emotional, which is the emotional component. It's like a drug that we anchor certain words or certain phrases or concepts that fit the context of the way that we understand the world. So I know that's a lot, but if you understand, you have to give them certain information, which was basically the questions that you ask that pull up the pain points, and then this, the resolve, the solution. And if you're going to anchor that in with music or some type of other emoji or sound, like when a Windows computer boots up on a system, you know that sound. I can't fake that sound, but you know what I'm talking about. And the other bells and whistles that you hear on your computers that anchor in and drive a certain reaction from you. Our brain records all of that. And so if you remember the analytical brain and the creative brain, that they're two sides of the way that we have and hold consciousness, then you're understanding how music anchors that emotional side. And the other part of that is you can put on a song and it'll change your state of awareness or change your mood. And so it does the same for your customers. And I used to use that quite frequently. I had a radio show in Seattle called Empowerment Radio. And I had the opening bumper, which was music that kind of picked you up and got you ready to listen. And then I had the next piece, which was an introduction to the content of what we'd be featuring on the radio show. And it was the beginning of Alan Parsons, I think it's called Sirius, if I'm not mistaken. But it's really quite grabbing. It's quite captivating music. And I did that to create an emotional trigger in the audience. And then we'd invite the guest on and we'd start up. Does that answer your question?
I think it does a little bit. As you were talking, I was thinking, so is it music that triggers the story to us? It triggers that emotion that triggers a story. And it could be because the story is the music, or the music triggers the story.
Okay, it could go both ways. Okay, so you could have a song that you had heard for the first time, and there's an event that's associated with that song. That way, the art would drive the awareness of the facts, or the story, the narrative. But the way that I was talking about is to use music as an anchor. The anchor is a way to say, here's the facts, and the music, what it's doing, it's driving the emotion. So as it's driving emotion, our comprehension, is going up. So the facts that we're hearing while the emotion is going on are anchored, okay? And that anchoring creates a memorable experience, and it becomes part of our awareness. And there's a whole huge conversation about awareness and the fact that the context of the way that you understand the world will drive the content of what you remember and how you perceive things. And I teach that in my leadership course. But if you looked at marketing as a subset of that, that these questions, they drive a particular context, which we know is directly relating to the buyer. They've got that problem. You knew that the work that I do says, what are the top 10 problems that your customers have? Let's list them out. And then let's come up with 3 questions for each area that are possible ways to engage that concept. Okay, that's how to reverse engineer it. And then when you ask that question, you're getting directly to the context out of which they're listening. Are you my solution? Are you my solution? Are you my solution? I know what my problem is and I know how I feel about it, but in my listening, I'm listening for it. And you come along and say, yeah, do you have this problem? And they're like, what? You know my problem? Of course you know the problem because you asked the right question. And then the music, if you are going to use music, will anchor in the messaging that you're conveying to the audience. And to go into any of that further or like drill down, you and I should hop on a phone call. We don't have time to get fully into it, but I can give you examples of how it applies to your business. So we've got time for a few more questions. What other questions do you guys have? James,
we have somebody from the chat who is Pete Colina,
Okay.
who's saying great stuff. Talked about the story order presented as important. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the specific order and why that's important?
Okay, so can you repeat that, James?
Pete, do you mind coming off mute? Is that possible?
Oh yeah. Thanks for the presentation. I was just asking.
You're welcome.
You talked about I think it was in the mechanics section about the order is important as well of the story presented, and it's not just the narrative. It's like the specific order you're telling the story. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that order?
I want you to think about 3 different components: the hook, the story, and the compelling offer, or what they used to call the close. The hook is the question that you're going to ask that drives the pain point. Okay. Are you in business and looking for a way to ramp up sales? Do you feel like your sales are flat from year to year and you're looking for a way to supercharge or hyper accelerate your growth? Do you find that telling people or delegating authority in your company is difficult at best, and looking for a way to build team around a concept around and unify their vision? So those are questions that I might ask in my consulting. And if you're my client, the answer is yeah, I got all those issues. And I've got probably 50 different questions that I can ask between the ones I like that. And so the first one is the hook, that question. The second part of the order is the compelling story. What's your name, Pete? Is it Pete?
Yeah, it's Pete.
Pete, you know, a lot of our other clients ask that same question. And I understand that you're probably listening in the way that it's going to resolve your business. Joe here had that same kind of business. And after he took on BDS Global, his sales went through the roof. We helped him to garner the exacting language and create a compelling offer that was so irresistible. His audience, the amount of inquiries, just the inquiries, overloaded their system. So if that's of interest, then I suggest you call me and we'll have a conversation about that. That's the second part. So there was the hook, the question about the issue. The second part was a compelling story that related you to Joe, who I just made up. But, I've got lots of testimonials that would relate to specific business problems or areas that I felt were being communicated on a phone call. So I create a story around that. And then a compelling offer, which is basically, look, if you're interested, give me a call. I'll give you an hour of free coaching. I'll spend an hour with you and I'll talk to you about your business with no expectation or obligation. If at the end of that hour, you see this as something that you want to move forward with, great. Love to invite you in, love to take you on as a client. If not, no harm, no foul. You'll get value out of the call. In fact, I'll send you a copy of my book, which gives you the complete narrative of everything that I do. And then if you want to follow up after that, great. So that offer is compelling, and you'll see a lot of people that are offering some kind of free product or a way to, it's called conversion. Okay, before you were just a cold lead or a slightly interested person or client or prospect, I should say. And then after that conversion, you became a potential client. So, and you could call those all kinds of different things. Like you could call it prospect or converted lead or cold lead and warm lead. People use different language for that. But what was important is the conversion. After you heard the story, it made you interested and it started getting your heart involved. And then the compelling offer said, hey, try it risk-free. If you like it, great. If not, no problem. And I put the onus on you. The ball is now in your court. You are informed and you can make your decision. And I'm not attached either way. Do you follow me? I'm not a ravenous dog trying to get you in the door. I really don't care who hears and who doesn't. What I care is that I'm delivering a solid message and the people that are my customers hear it immediately because they're listening for it. Are you my solution? Are you my solution? And if you occur like that in their listening, they will step forward. And there's really not a lot you have to do about it. You just have to be really clear and know what you deliver and know what you don't deliver. Like a lot of people will come to me and they'll ask me for things that I don't do. I'm not that industry, supply chain expert that, can work on your vertical and, have contacts in China that I've already worked with over 20 years. I'm not that guy. But if you are an emerging leader and you feel like these concepts are new and you'd like to really anchor them in your leadership, then definitely I'm of service. I work with emerging leaders to help them, step into their greatness, if you will. And so hook, story, compelling offer for close. Does that give you an order?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, okay. Anything else, you guys? Go ahead, I see a hand. Vicki?
Good afternoon. Hi, Bennett. Thank you so much.
Hi. Hey.
So where I am a wannabe woman leader in my community, and I live in a very small community, but I'm breaking into the men's world.
Mhm.
And I do road construction or the subcontractor, right? So what I'm finding is my story, we're a service. They have seen me working out on the road, right? And now I have a company. And so now they're seeing my company out there. The challenge has been switching to working for a business and then having my own company and having them take me seriously. Another thing that happened in there is—
Okay, can I stop you right there?
Yeah.
There's a book called The E-Myth. And I think the recent version is The E-Myth Revisited. And you can get this on Amazon. It's by a guy named Michael Gerber. Read that book because it's going to talk to you about the transition between being a technician working for a larger contractor and three components that you have to have running a business, which is the technician, yes, but you also have to have entrepreneur and also manager. Okay, go ahead.
So thank you, and I wrote it down.
Mhm.
Part of my story, which is pretty compelling in the community, is that I was run down by a car while I was working. And the woman was on acid. It was a big deal. I'm just starting to get better now. I lived. But my company, I have been slowly learning. I've been coming to a lot of these different, working with the EDC and ScaleUp as I've been mentally trying to get my brain back online and all that. Mm-hmm. So as I've been doing that, I've been establishing some relationships. However, in our community, so I have that story that's compelling. I am a state certified flagger instructor for the state of Washington. So I teach, and now I'm moving into sales, plus having, I can't flag anymore, but I do have crews out there working for me. We just got a big contract, which will start this coming year. But what I'm having trouble is having our community take me seriously. First of all, we've never needed flaggers in our community. So this is something that they're pushing up against, the traffic control part, but they've seen what happens when people are out there working, almost getting killed. So I'm in this place where I feel like I have a compelling story. I offer traffic control classes and certify people's workers. I want everybody to stay safe. So I'm happy if they don't want to use my service. I still want to educate the community, but I'm having that trouble transitioning, being taken seriously, and then being able to communicate. I get really nervous. I'm insecure. I lose my words and I sound stupid. And when I'm intimidated, right? So there isn't really a way to market other than in our community, except for being seen, and then my face and my interactions.
Got it.
I'm
Okay,
kind of
I think I
lost.
understand. I understand, Vicky. And if you want, I'll give you a free hour of coaching. My number is right there.
Okay.
Because there's a lot to say here. First of all, you said you've got a compelling story, but I wonder if it's a story about you, or is it a story about the value that you provide?
I
So
don't know. Yeah.
I would challenge you to write down the top 10 problems that exist in the marketplace, and this goes for everyone, that you should write down a list of the top 10 problems. What is going wrong out there? Tell me about what's going wrong. Get into the minds of your buyers, of other construction firms who might hire you. And what problems do they have? Do they have problems with people showing up on time? Do they have problems with people that they paid for that didn't actually do the work? Do they have problems getting people to be flexible, or, what are those top 10? I don't know. I'm not in the business, but, those are 3 that I could guess. And write down those problems, and
Okay.
then write down 3 questions for every single problem that you identified. That is your story. Basically, is this going wrong? Is that going wrong? Is this going wrong? And if so, maybe it might make sense for you to call me. It doesn't matter. Look, some of the most powerful people in the world that I know are women. I promise you, there are women that are 10 times the strength of men. Okay? Not to say that there aren't some great men out there, but being a woman does not preclude you from being powerful. And so your story about being a woman, if it's undermining your presence as a business leader, we got to identify that and get rid of that story, because
Okay.
that's what's in your way. And you got to get these stories that we tell about ourselves are random and arbitrary. Some of the greatest leaders that have ever existed came from nothing. They had nothing. And all of a sudden they're, the CEO, like Howard Schultz is the CEO of Starbucks. And it's like, oh my God, how did that happen? Right. And so is everybody's screen black? Did something happen to the, okay. Sorry about that. I just want to get that back up. So Howard Schultz is one of them. There's many others that started in poverty and have led amazing lives. And so part of the coaching I do around leadership is to take all of these exhausting problems that we've had that we think limit us and convert them into the wisdom and gifts that accentuate and make your leadership really powerful. I started doing this because in 1989, landed in jail with my 3rd DUI. I got 3 DUIs, and it was a bad time. I was in my early 20s, and all of a sudden I started going to AA meetings and discovering that there was a whole new way of living life without being a party animal, which I was used to in college. And I grew through that, and I learned how these lessons apply to the way we live, like understanding that your perspective or the context in which you see and understand the world creates the content in which you engage. Context determines content. For all the programmers out there, you know that, because the syntax of an operating system will define what programs you can run on that operating system, right? So our brains are much the same way. If your context is scattered and full of limiting beliefs or stories about, you and your limitations, or what it means to be a woman, or what it means to be your age, or whatever education you've got or other difficulties you've had, then what you need to do is readjust those stories so that they become strengths. understanding perspective or how people perceive the language that I'm putting out there was critical in my business success. Otherwise, I was like the rest of the pack, spewing forth features and benefits to people that weren't listening, that had their sorting machine going on. They couldn't hear me, they wouldn't hear me. And I'm spending all day, every day doing that. It's like, why? Why do that when you could ask one pointed question coming from a place of true empowerment and engage the audience? And the people that were supposed to step forward did, and the ones that were supposed to buzz off, buzzed off, so they didn't waste your time. And that's what you want with successful business. And so if you want to learn the particulars of what I just said, give me a call and I'll spend some time with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who else? Anybody else? Oh, I see another hand. James, does anybody else have a question?
I don't see anybody. Oh,
I have
here.
a
Go ahead.
question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, it's so dark in here. I can't change that.
Oh,
I
that's
was
okay.
just wondering what you think, Bennett, about precision in terminology. So recently I've been told by various business coaches that I need to tailor my language to match theirs, but I'm offering a scientific service, and there's no language I can tailor. So I don't know if.
Okay,
that's
can
important.
you make a list of the top 10 problems with your clients?
Yes.
Okay, so do that. And, look at that list and say how much jargon is in here. What jargon is absolutely necessary? Because some of the jargon maybe in your field is going to appeal to them because it's a word that they know and that represents a certain commodity. And so in your case, I might suggest a certain level of technical prowess. And when your coach says the right words, that's it. It's a mixture of asking the right questions that speak to those problems. Like, what's one of the problems that your customers have that you solve?
Anxiety, chronic anxiety and stress, especially in leaders and persons of high potential.
Okay, so what's the question about that? How would you ask that question?
To frame the problem.
Don't make it, you already said it. So use the exact same words you just used, only state it in the form of a question.
Okay, yeah, I'm in the stage of conceptualization, so I don't have a business yet. I'm trying to resurrect one I had years ago.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so for instance, do you have anxiety or a high level of stress that keeps you from enjoying your life? Do you experience headaches or other types of situations that keep you from being happy? I mean, just questions like that.
Mhm.
Oh, okay, I understand. We understand. We've worked with, I don't know where your experience comes from, but you should reference your experience. I've worked with people in that same category and have solutions that completely change their life. That's the story. That simple. I've worked with other people that had those kind of problems and we changed their life. And that applies to everybody in the group. If you can come up with a story similar to that, that's of interest. Oh, okay, well, tell me about that. Well, I work with, I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs who didn't have a business plan. They had a concept about what they wanted to do, but they didn't have the organization or idea of how to get that started. And so I wrote this book, Launching Your Dreams, and it created a context in which businesses could move from what is known as the barroom napkin you know, those ideas you're sitting at the bar sketching on a cocktail napkin, to the boardroom table, which is an indication of you've got a business and a board of directors and you're underway. So my phrase was how to move your concept from barroom napkin to boardroom table. And that tells a story, does it not?
Yes, definitely.
So in your business, there's a story too. And I would love to help you find that story. And the assignment is to write down the top 10 problems. Hey, if there's 20, list those and then circle the top 10, because you have to narrow your scope to a very refined offering. You're going to want to take the top 10 issues and find, okay, what are the top 3? And maybe speak to those 3, or maybe just 1. You know, it really depends on what kind of business, what kind of offering it is. And if you can ask the right questions that engage the audience at the level of that problem, then tell them a story about why, you know, they should work with you in terms of not your features and benefits. Please don't do your features and benefits, but the results that you've experienced. If you haven't had a business, what other results have you had in your life that are comparable? Or we work with the functionality that's helped thousands of people change their life. Now, that may not have been you, but it's still true if you're using those same principles to help your clients. Okay, do you understand that?
Yeah, totally.
And there's ways to leverage your story, but ultimately your story needs to engage. It needs to tell the story of why someone would want to do business with you. We had success with other people. If you're interested, here's my offer. If you're interested, call me. I take calls on Thursdays. I'll give you an hour, but I just have 2 agreements that I want to set with you. These are called upfront agreements, and I'll teach you these too. 1, if I schedule the time with you, you'll show up and be ready to talk. Okay, I don't want any distractions. I don't want you to be taking other phone calls. I want your Facebook turned off and you are completely dedicated to our phone call. Okay, agreed? Yes?
Agreed.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you on that. The second thing is, at the end of that hour that I'm going to gift you, if the answer is yes, would you agree that that's going to be the most clear you're ever going to be on whether this is right for you or not? They typically say, yeah. I mean, if you wait a couple days, it's going to start fading and pretty soon it'll be 0 cognition. So what I ask is that at the end of that phone call, I'm simply going to ask you, hey, do you want to move forward? Is it appropriate for you to take the next step? Yes or no, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and I'm going to go my own way. Either way, I'm cool. Not with a maybe. I can't do maybe. It's either yes or no. And so the upfront agreement may sound like high pressure sales, but it really sets them up to be able to make a clear decision. And if they can't make a clear decision, that could indicate another problem. And if they can't, if they're not really truly clear that you are that solution for them, then you might not want to take them on as clients.
Right.
You know, those are the same people that 3 or 4 weeks into it are going to start complaining because you didn't really get to what they wanted out of, but they didn't know what they wanted either. You know, now a lot of my clients tell me they want one thing and we go through the coaching and some other things emerge from that. Like we've talked about some things for today's presentation that emerged from our conversation. That's fine. You know, I let it go. I let it flow. Ultimately, I want to serve what you guys want out of this presentation. You know, you should feel really clear that that differentiation sets you apart from the crowd. And if you can explain or tell a story about how you're different from everyone else by the questions you ask and how you engage your audience, you will be successful in business. If you can't, you'll be like all those other guys that are just gray matter in a sea of people who don't know what the heck they're doing.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Totally. In fact, I
Yeah.
got it while you were talking. All of it just came to mind. I have the angle, I have the story now. And so, yeah.
Well, start writing, you know, after our meeting, you know, get busy with your, you know, and also take down my information. If you want to send me a note and you want me to spend a little time, I'm happy to do that. Are there any other questions
Thank you.
before we conclude?
Yeah, go
You're
ahead,
welcome.
Monique. Yeah, yep.
Hi, I'm
Hey,
Monique.
Monique. Yeah.
So I'm pretty clear where I'm unique in my industry. My background's infectious disease. Academically, I have a background in biochemistry, cell biology, and mathematics, and those are
Mhm.
things that kind of differentiate me. I do a lot. I do all of my marketing on social media, primarily Instagram. And what's one of the things you're saying that resonates for me is that story, because I respond to stories. And so I think instinctually I've understood that. And one thing that I'm right now thinking about, struggle might be too strong a word, but certainly something I'm beginning to wrestle with, is creating a business that is founded by me, but isn't anchored completely in me. And
Oh.
so I noticed that people respond when I'm on social media. They like faces, they like that story, but I'm really trying to, I've started for quite a while using third language when I'm talking about myself, not third language, talking about myself
In the third person. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like just me coming out, but me talking about my business or talking about myself as the founder. And so I'm curious if you have thoughts about how to nurture that storytelling without, for small businesses, without the story being the person's, really keeping the
Yeah.
focus on what we offer.
Okay,
Because
yeah,
I feel
got it.
it's tempting for me, I will tell you, because the response I get when I put myself out there is more than when I'm just talking about or sharing what we do or what we offer. They like that human piece, but
Right.
so
Well,
any
I
thoughts?
would say a couple of things. So there's a difference between a service and a business. A service, you know, let's just put this into contextual terms, okay? That we might, I know that these could be argued in different ways. I'm just going to give you an example of something that might clarify your ideas. A service might be an accountant or a lawyer that provides either accountancy or bookkeeping for a business over, 30 years. And when they're done, when it's time for them to retire, they hang up their hat and they turn off the lights and they go and play golf, right? And that's a service, because without that person, the business doesn't exist. A business, however, sets itself up to duplicate its systems and processes such that it creates market value. Now, you could have like I was looking at Chanel No. 5, the woman that started that perfume. Chanel was the last name, her last name. And I think No. 5 was the number of iterations they went through to get to Chanel No. 5. And it remained the brand logo and the name of the business, even though it carried the family name. And a lot of businesses will create the magic, like Walt Disney, for instance, and then they carry the magic long after the founder's dead. Disney is a perfect example of that. And the difference there is that they create systems and processes that create what we call market value. Now, in the world, there's the conversation that's appropriate for a young entrepreneur and this great dream you've got about launching a business and all the good it's going to do for the world and all those altruistic, qualitative concepts that are deep in your heart. Okay, I appreciate that. And that's one kind of conversation. The other kind of conversation comes from the fact that I spent 10 years in the money business, and I understand what the phases of business are, the threshold of startup and some of the dynamics of that business model, or what it takes to move into the mid-market category where you're making 10 to 50 or $150 million, and the problems or situations you'll find yourself there, or what an enterprise level or a billion-dollar company experiences as that takes shape. But from a broader perspective, business is designed or should be designed with the end in mind. Stephen Covey talked about that in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And essentially what you're doing as a business owner is you're looking at a 1, 3, and 5-year strategy. In other words, here's the goals that I have for 1 year. I'd like to have this number of sales, which equates to this many dollars, and this or that market, just some basics that say, if I could get this, I'm underway. I got cash flow, okay? And maybe that's all you concentrate on in the first year. You're not interested in fixing kinks in the system or any of that other stuff that you do after that mark. But after that mark, between 1 and 3 years, all of a sudden you need a new email server because you've got so many people that are corresponding, or you need a system of management that centralizes the vision of upper level management and delegates authority to the appropriate people, and then a system of accountability. And then there's your managers and your board of directors and your board of advisors. What's the difference? And all this other stuff that goes in with substantiating a larger company. HR policies, dashboard analytics, a more refined strategy, and certainly a larger pool of working capital. Because if you're reaching more of an audience, you need more money to fuel that engine, right? So all of those issues go into moving the business beyond that sole proprietor service-based business into a well-founded company that has market value. And market value is a big conversation that I don't really have time to get into all of it. It's not just the top line revenue that you earn. You're a $10 million earning company. That's not the only component to market value. Some companies are worth more than 10 million. I mean, look at Tesla. And that's called a multiplier. So in other words, if your growth trajectory between 3 and 5 years does this hockey stick thing where it starts to climb like, like out of control, hyper growth, that means that if you're in your 3rd year, you can multiply the value of the company accordingly. And I'm not going to get into the details about that, but that's called a multiplier. Ultimately.
So some of the things that I've done is that I've made a decision that I'm only hiring employees. A lot of people in my industry rent rooms, and I don't have control over, obviously, somebody else that's renting a room. So those are some of the things that I'm doing. I'm sharing.
And that's part of the business model. So you're telling me about your business model right now.
Right. Well, that's what I think that's what I'm asking you about is like, as a business model, if I'm looking to frame my business less, turn OSA, which is actually my last name, and it is meaningful to me. And but
and
to
how
turn
many years?
that
You said you got 3 years with that name behind you?
I have 3 years. I went from a single, like basically me renting a room somewhere to 3,000 square foot spa with a big retail presence, a website. We've done a pretty big jump, especially during the pandemic. And I've had a really pretty incredible response on social media. And I think part of it is, a variety of things. One is, I think my background in infectious disease, people feel more secure coming to a place that is based in science, honestly, at this time, at least the people that are drawn to that. And then I just, being very lucky, am in a very beautiful space.
Well,
So
I think that the answer to your question, it might be more detailed, and it might make sense for us to hop on a phone call. I also suspect that your name should be sold with the business, and that if you've built a brand under a particular name, that your customers are counting on that name.
Correct.
That is part of their awareness in the brand. And so,
Yeah.
but
And
there's,
that was intentional, because when I started, I didn't want what I felt like my strongest asset was quite frankly, me, my mind, my background, my professional and academic background and training. It wasn't a lotus flower or a babbling brook spa. It was me. And so that has happened in many ways. And now I'm trying to figure out what's that piece where it's like, I'm still there, but now we're talking about something that's, it's never been me. It's actually a concept around that.
So to conclude what I was saying, I would say, does this question make sense to you? Do these two questions make sense? First of all, how do I monetize my brand? So we've got a particular way that we do business. It's not just perfume and low-level beauty supplies. This is something that is on a clinical type level, that, or whatever words you use for that. So how do I monetize that brand? And secondly, what's the strategy? What's my exit strategy? So if you don't know about exit strategy, Google the keyword exit strategy, and you'll find that they say, well, it's all of the elements that you need in place to be able to sell your business. And it's not that you're going to sell your business, maybe not at least immediately, but that those elements make you, they give you what's called liquidity. In other words, you can convert the business to cash more easily, because those particular elements are situated with the business. And that's a longer conversation too. And I'd love to have that with you, because it sounds like you're very smart. You just need a strategy to be able to, have an exit. And then, once you've got all that money that came from the exit, there's what's next in your life. That's really the goal of an entrepreneur. Should not be to chain themselves into one particular business for the rest of their lives. It should be create market value, so that eventually that business can sell, they cash out and move on to the next project. And if you look at Elon Musk, that's exactly what he did. Those guys started off, relatively, well, his mom was a model, so that was pretty cool. But, he started and he built this software, this game program that he sold. And then he went to PayPal and built PayPal. And then he went to SpaceX, so it's like all of these projects that have come along have catapulted him to the next level. And you should be thinking like that as an entrepreneur.
Okay, that's actually helpful. I like that exit strategy, almost starting at the end and looking at the pieces that need to be in place for that longer term goal.
Let me just say one other thing. I'm part of an organization called the Exit Planning Institute, EPI, and they've actually got a certification that deals with exit planning, because there's all these different issues around selling your business. There's the transfer of wealth and the protection that you'll need as you transfer wealth so that you don't have to spend half the money that you made on the sale of the business in taxes. There's ways to accommodate those sales that minimize your tax risk. There's ways to broker the deals so that you maximize the value of a company. There's all different kinds of things. So if you're interested in talking about that more, I'm also happy to engage in that conversation. James, how are we doing on time?
We are well past the time, but that is fine. If people want to
Okay.
hang on, then that is perfectly okay.
Any other questions? Anybody else have any questions? Or if you want to call me, I welcome that as well.
All
Okay.
right. Well,
Well, thank you
so
everyone
much.
for coming. Thank you, James.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were able to take something away from today, right? If not, one thing, then the initial thing they came for, they left with something else. So I really appreciate your time, Bennett. Definitely,
Yeah, my pleasure.
You in the audience, for sure, reach out to Bennett. He's got a ton of insight, and I look forward to seeing you guys in our next ScaleUp Mastermind. The next one we have is the Path to Seven Figures, and Daryl Moreau will be talking on that. So thank you all tonight. Thank you, Bennett. Thank you, everybody who came, and have a wonderful evening.
Okay, thanks again. Good night.
Thanks.